Here we are, guys. It's another beautiful Monday morning, afternoon. No, it's afternoon. And we're here with Let's Get Real, Canadian perspectives on fundraising. The usual suspects have returned for this week's podcast. We have Ed Sluga, Ken Ramsey, myself, Lisa McDonald. And we are here to talk about a few different things. I know we tease and we like to talk about you two being the grumpy old men. But Ken, it sounds like you have something less grumpy to talk about, and looking at the fundraising profession as being a noble one, and something that we really need to consider and remember. I want to talk about National Philanthropy Day. What is it? Why do we care? What's its importance? And then Ed, you're gonna take us on is it a linguistic journey or is it just about words? We're talking about fundraising language.
Common knowledge. As much as we don't like that term anymore, it's about a common knowledge being the thing that binds us together. And I think it's something that can help to identify and perhaps a process, if we institute it, a way to relieve some of the issues within our sector. But first, you've got a beautiful day there, Lisa. I mean, the fall is here. Are we happy about fall? Are we summer people, fall people, winter, all seasons people? I mean, one of the great things about working in this business is it kind of does follow the seasons, right? And
yeah, I mean, I'm always been about fall. I like sweater season. I like cozy things. I'm a runner, so running into the fall is just the most beautiful time. You're not getting wet and you're not getting too hot. I like all things fall. It's when I got married.
Oh, really?
So yes, I just celebrated my 28th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations. Well done. Yeah.
And then there's, pumpkin pie and Thanksgiving, which.
Yes. Too many turkeys. How about
Speaking of turkeys, Ken?
Yeah.
By the way, I just celebrated my 29th wedding anniversary.
Okay. Wow.
Gotcha. I love fall too. It's my favorite. Both Janice and my wife Janice and I, it's our favorite season. So in part because you witness the dying. And that sounds negative, but out of the dying comes the rebirth, right? And so that and it's the most dramatic change, that in spring. And as I get older, I don't like the heat. So I don't like summer.
Yeah, I'm with you a little bit. I don't like the mosquitoes and the bugs. By the way, 31 years, guys, just so you know.
Okay.
If you need any advice, let me know. Okay? Let me know. I don't like the bugs. I mean, that's why I like the fall. I like the spring before the bugs wake up, and I like the fall when they go to sleep again. And I feel you can enjoy the outdoors way more than in the summer, where you're kind of constantly swatting away. When I was younger, I always used to like the summer, right? I love the summer. It was great and it was a lot of fun. But I think it's kind of, I was in Quebec City recently, and when in Quebec City, I loved it. As somebody who hadn't been there since I was 13, I loved Quebec City. It was fantastic. It was everything you want. When I was 13, I thought it was boring and wasn't a great trip for fun, right? But of course, as you grow older, you grow some wisdom, and the wisdom is Quebec City is a fantastic place, and the fall is a great time of the year. So there you go. I'm with you both.
All right, so let us take that wisdom that we're acquiring and start our chat. We'll take a little break first, and then we're going to come back. Ken, I'm really interested to hear this noble profession. What has got you on this positive bent? All right, take a break. We'll come right back. All right, here we go. Ken, Fundraising is
Okay.
one of the noble professions.
Well, as you may or may not know, I took a week off. I wasn't around for this last one. I had a wonderful fill-in, but I did a tour of Cape Breton Island and uh, and the Cabot Trail, and it not I'd done that trip once before in the middle of the summer, but let me tell you, and it's breathtaking. But this time, with the changing of the colors, it was awe-inspiring. It was really you can't avoid the grandeur of nature. Uh, it's speech. It makes you speechless, and we enjoyed every second of it. But it also gave me time to think and a different perspective, and that's what travel can do, as you were just saying, Ed, with Quebec City. Travel and getting into a totally different environment can give you perspective on things. One of the things I was thinking about was my longtime profession, fundraising. And I realized that fundraising as a profession is hugely underappreciated. And I make the statement that fundraising is actually one of the most noble of professions. Uh, Noble meaning high ideals, high values, and we don't think of it that way. And so I'll get grumpy after a while, but I come back with this kind of big perspective, I want to talk about fundraising being noble. And I have two data points. One of them is about 2.5 years ago, I did a survey. And I surveyed 5,000 plus fundraisers in Canada. And I wanted to know what fundraisers fear the most about their jobs. And it was a multiple choice. And, things like I'm afraid of facing donors and talking to them. I thought that would be right up there. I'm afraid that I don't know the tax laws of Canada adequately, and so on. I threw in one at the end, a throwaway, and that was the one that the vast majority of fundraisers chose. In fact, 82% of people chose this, and it was this: I don't want to be seen as being manipulative or trying to convince people to do something. And at first blush, that looks like an odd thing to say, but it's to me, it's fundraisers want to do fundraising the right way, the noble way, if you will. So that's one data point. The next one is happened when I was leaving the Humber College course. I'd been on the faculty for several years, and Ed was coming in to take over. But we did at the end of the term, we did the whole faculty sat around a table, and we did a debrief. And the focus was, of course, on enrollment, because enrollment was trending down, and it continued to trend down. But I looked at these other very good fundraisers around this table. I said, I don't understand it. We have a profession that is works solely for the betterment of society, and it's one, if it's done correctly, you can make a good living at. There's lots of growth opportunity. There's always jobs. 92% of the people off that course were placed right away in jobs. But we're having trouble recruiting people. Well, my two data points go together, I believe. And the way I always used to say it is, if you had to phone your grandmother and tell her what course you just enrolled in, uh, and if would you like to say fundraising? No, because fundraising has this bad reputation because it is seen as manipulative and trying to convince people to do things they don't want to do. However, we as fundraisers do not claim this enough, the nobility of our profession. We don't we don't live this enough. All right? We don't structure our profession to reflect this. And I'm being deadly serious. Think about other professions. Is there fundraising done correctly? Is there a better profession? Is there a profession you could be more proud of? I don't think so. So I'm here to proclaim it today, right? But the opportunity to proclaim this is always available, right? Uh, Trust in charities is decreasing. Every year they measure trust levels in institutions, and charities are like most institutions now in our society. And in that the trust level is decreasing, right? Uh, and I think we have to start speaking up to change that. But it can't be just words. We have to back it up. So I made a list of what fundraising is not. Okay.
Okay.
Fundraising is not doing lotteries. That's gambling, right? It's not slick marketing, although marketing has a place in fundraising to convey mission, but it can't preclude a total transaction. That's just marketing. That's what that is. It's not large participatory events. They have a place, but that's not the heart and soul of fundraising. What is fundraising? It's working one human being to another human being to to facilitate, and that's the key word, to facilitate that person doing what she wants to do. Not trying to convince her to do something that you want to do, her to do, but it's to facilitate doing what she wants to do, and ultimately finding life meaning and fulfillment in those actions. That's philanthropy. That's fundraise at its best, right? So I I want to end by talking about this noble profession, right? And part of it is I'm interested to see what both of you are going to say because it follows on this, right? But when we look at Philanthropy Day, and when we look at the nomenclature of fundraising, etc., we have to stick to high ideals, right? We have to be truthful all the time. We have to always do what's right for the donor, basic stuff, right? We have to find the emotional center of fundraising, right? And I know I'm not going to go tell a bunch of stories. But I once was challenged by a major gift team of a large hospital. When I made that statement, all philanthropic gifts, all gifts, have at its core an emotional response to the mission of the organization. And this major gift person stood up and said, "No, you're wrong, Ken. No, our job is to present a business plan, really a business plan, and showing impact and dollars well spent." And I said, "Yeah, that's part of the periphery. But at its core, you're asking people to give away their assets, right? And it's the only our whole society is founded on accumulating your assets. And here we come along and we want to talk to them about the opportunity to give away their assets. And that requires great skills to do that. And by the way, and we won't do it now, but go through sometime and list the skills required to be a top-notch fundraiser, working one-on-one with another human being. And I'll tell you, there's hardly any profession that requires those level of altruistic skills and diverse skill sets. So I don't make that statement sort of off without a lot of thought. The statement being that fundraising is one of the most noble professions. So that's my contribution today.
I like this softer side of Ken. I like this. I've been away on holiday and thought about the world. I drink the Kool-Aid, Ken, I have for some time, but I'm going to just, my little quick add on to what you're saying is around the role that I think mentorship plays in this. And I think that a lot of this has to do with educating new people into the profession. I mean, once you've been around a while, like all three of us have, you really understand the nuance that comes with fundraising and being a good fundraiser and what that means. But when you first start out, like when I think about my first role with the Terry Fox Foundation, kind of young, like mid-20s, I bought into the fact that it was Terry Fox, and that's what I would tell people, as opposed to labeling myself as a fundraiser. I don't know that it was because I was embarrassed, but I know that I certainly wasn't sure of where I fit into that hierarchy of professional careers. So I kind of relied on the integrity of the cause, I think, at that point. But I think there's a lot that can be done to educate young people or people new to the profession. They don't have to be young. They can just be new to the profession about what our profession is all about. And I had a conversation, a young man came to my door not very long ago, and he was soliciting on behalf of the Canadian Cancer Society. Now, he worked for a third-party organization. It wasn't Canadian Cancer directly. But he and I had a bit of a discussion and a bit of a dialogue. And at one point, he kind of sheepishly said, that what he was doing was like begging for money, or, he kind of made this throwaway comment. And I was like, oh no. I said, you are not begging for money. And I essentially said, I repeated your position there, Ken. I said, what you're doing is helping people fulfill their philanthropic dreams. So you're showing them how they can make a world be better for the next generation without cancer or with better treatments. And his eyes lit up. Like clearly, he had never heard it positioned to himself this way.
Yeah.
And I think he was very personable, and I think he liked what he was doing well enough, or he wouldn't have been doing it. But no one had given him that framework of why this was actually very noble, rewarding work that he could be doing. And I'm quite sure that when he left and went on to the next person, I think he had just a little bit more pride in what he was talking about and what he was saying. And it was just in the framing. So I think we can teach and have these conversations and show why fundraising is something that's really making a difference in this world and something to be proud of. So.
Fundraisers are hungry for this. They really are. When I talk to them, especially younger folks starting out or been in it, and they're starting to get jaded because all they do is pressure, bring in money. And so when I talk to them about this, it's just like the fellow at the door, Lisa. Yeah. Their eyes open up and they see their profession as a profession. And I don't know why we don't start this way. I don't know why, but again, there's lots of reasons which we've talked about in previous weeks.
And we'll keep talking about, because it is about leadership and it's about all these other things, exactly. Training, mentoring. Yeah.
So anyway, and there's another element to this, which I did not go into today. and that was the spiritual element. Because there's an element of fundraising that's spiritual, especially in planned giving. It's more available, but even in current giving, you're giving away assets. You're trusting. You're there. There's it's living your life a different way, and to reflect a different meaning to your life. And that I'll talk about that some other.
Yeah, I think that's something that's worthy of its own whole discussion,
Yeah.
Ken. So let's remember that for another time, because that's really important too, and that is worthy of discussion. Ed, we're going to go for a break, but is there anything you wanted to add before we do that?
I just want to add one thing, which I think goes right back to how people get involved in this, and all of us have been on LinkedIn in the past, and people want to connect, and you always take a quick look and look at their history of work. Where have they worked? And normally, if you go back, you'll see all the way back. You'll see for profit, not for profit. They don't start in the not for profit world, right? They start there, and then all of us have had calls from people who are in that transitionary mode for whatever reason. But I'll tell you, a lot of them, and I know this is cliched, and I know this is perhaps becoming less and less a thing, but we're filled with a sector that have women taking a lead role, and a lot of them who are in sort of traditional families, perhaps, or have children now in kind of what we believe to be the extension of the conversation of what family is. And when I talk to them, and they're making the transition, there's some wisdom there. I bring that up because they've lived a little bit of a life, and they bring a decision like, I'm going to change jobs, or I'm going back into the workforce. And you know what? I want to go work for a not-for-profit because I want to feel fulfilled, and I
feel
want
good about it.
I want to feel good about what I'm doing, and they're coming at this with this notion of the work that I'm going to do in society needs to make a difference to society. Now, if they don't have a skill set like, PhD in environmental science or a medical degree or things like that, they can't go into the program delivery, perhaps social work degree, or you name it. Lots of technical degrees out there. They don't have that. What can they do? They can raise money for organizations that actually carry out this good work in the world. So people are coming to the sector, Ken, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
With the idea that they want this. Now, what goes wrong? What's the thing that stops them perhaps from feeling that? And I'll just, we can talk about that. I think that's a time to dive into what is it about the sector that takes people imbued with this kind of want to make the world a better place. I want to change things. I want to do something good. And suddenly they're like, oh my God, I got to get out of this profession, which we're seeing on the rise. But I hear you loud and clear. Lots of people who feel this way when they get involved, and when they're it's a vocation for them to a certain degree. And that's a good thing. But perhaps we don't do everything we can to foster that feeling that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think there's so many things that feeds into this discussion, but I'm glad we started here with really the notion of what people often think about philanthropy and fundraising and why they get involved. It's because they believe in something and they want to make a difference and all of that. And I think that's always the best place to start. And then we can look at all of the other things. So no shortage of topics, but we only have a limited amount of time today. So let's take a break. And then my chat about National Philanthropy, I think, kind of feeds nicely into this, Ken. So we'll visit that in just a minute. All right. We are back. We are continuing our chat. Ed Sluga, Ken Ramsey, myself, Lisa McDonald, talking about Canadian perspectives on fundraising, and we're trying to get real in the things that we're talking about. All right, we're not trying to sugarcoat everything. We're not, we're really, we've all three of us have been around this sector for some time, and we certainly have our opinions. Some of us have more opinions than others, but we're here to talk about fundraising, and what I wanted to chat a bit about was National Philanthropy Day. So Ed, do you know when National Philanthropy Day is?
My quick question would be which one? But
No.
no, I don't know. I don't know the exact date. No.
Ken, do you?
No,
Okay.
I've heard of it.
Okay, well, that's a good start.
Yeah.
So our Canadian government has declared every November 15th to be National Philanthropy Day. So it's a recognized, day of to celebrate all things philanthropic. And what has happened is that a number of organizations like the AFP, Association of Fundraising Professionals, have taken National Philanthropy Day as a chance to kind of grow the profession, and and those professionals use it within their organizations, within their associations, to talk about philanthropy as a career. So if we think that fundraising is one of the noble professions, you would think that something like National Philanthropy Day would be given as being something really positive that everyone wants to be talking about and doing something for. But are we? And why or why not? Do we need a National Philanthropy Day? What do you think, Ed? Do we need one?
Well, look, I made a joke about which one, and I do think that what's happened is in our sector, and in our society, that there is the belief that we need to promote this work. We need to promote giving. We need to promote the work of engaging. We need to promote the work of informing people that this is an option. Philanthropy is something that is attainable for everyone, whether it's through a job or whether it's through the work that you wish to fund and support through the organizations in your community, province, your region, the country, around the world. So I think these things are necessary. I do think, though, that a lot of times, because there's a disjointedness in our sector, we have lots of them hanging about. And I think what happens is there is a confusion because, and this actually will tie into a little bit of what I'm going to be talking about in our third segment here, is about language. Who kind of distributes this language? What's it all mean? And even the word philanthropy itself can turn people off. The person who gives, regularly at their church every Sunday, gives to the local, softball team, maybe, helps, with various other things, the local drama school for kids in need. They give dollars for that. They don't consider themselves philanthropists. They don't consider themselves working in it. We're using that term. So I do think that the idea of the promotion around this is really super important. I do think as well that we need to find a way to make sure that we're explaining it properly. By the way, isn't Giving Tuesday in November?
No.
No.
It's not.
No.
What's the other one in November? There is another one in November, isn't
Well,
there?
there's Movember.
There's Movember. But so I do think that there's a moment of yes, we need this, but I think that we require a rethink of all of the national moments associated with fundraising, whether it's a professional activity, or whether it's trying to get donors to give, and finding a way to kind of bring this into some sort of clarity. And so again, I didn't know much about it, and neither did you, Ken. But I think it's a good idea. But like with a lot of ideas, perhaps its deployment hasn't been as robust
Right.
as we need.
Yeah. So
Um,
I do have something to say. And by the way,
okay.
someone asked me about Giving Tuesday on the
I
weekend.
think it is November. I think it is in
No,
November as
I
well.
asked her when it was.
Oh,
She
it's
said,
Oh yeah, it's
December.
December 2nd. So
December
it's close
2nd.
enough. It's 3 weeks away from
okay.
Philanthropy Day. So
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
my point. I missed
All
the
right.
month. The
But,
point still
the point is, by the way, the federal government has every day of the year is a day. Oh, there's an egg marketing day.
Yeah.
There's, a garbage collection day. I mean, it goes on and on. So it's, what do you do with it? And what does our profession do with it? Right. And if, that little thing about, that I just spouted off about being a noble profession, it would be an opportunity to talk about the profession,
Mm-hmm.
right? And straighten people out. It's not, philanthropy is not just for the wealthy. It's for any human being that wants to make a difference and give to a charitable cause. So there's an opportunity there. But who's going to speak on our behalf?
Mm-hmm.
I know that's an old concern of ours. Who, I don't know what's planned and how we're going to use that opportunity, as you said, Ed, to do something to start to build the profession the right way. The reason we don't know when it is, Lisa, is no one's ever done anything with it in the past, right?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so it's interesting, and I was asking myself these questions about who uses National Philanthropy Day and does it matter? The thing that started me thinking was, of course, an article that I ran last week in Hillborn Charity E-News, and it was written by our friend Marla, who was here last week filling in for Ken. And, Marla, and we'll include the link to the article at the bottom of the podcast. But, Marla really sees it as a chance to kind of, as you've said, promote philanthropy, to celebrate, to inspire and support. It has all of these kind of ideals behind it. But then the question is, how are the boots hitting the ground on that? So what does that look like? And is there being, where's the intention behind that? Is it an event? Is it a way to communicate another, with your donors and say thank you? I mean, there's opportunities, but who is going to be kind of capitalizing on that is the question. And Marla says one thing that did resonate with me, though, and again, it ties back to our profession as a whole. And her comment was, for all of the transformative work being done in our sector, much of the work remains behind the scenes, and our professional efforts tend to be invisible to the broader public. So I mean, I think, that kind of says who we should be aiming some of this discussion towards. It's not necessarily an internal discussion, but it's to helping the larger audience, more Canadians, to understand how the nonprofit sector is serving them in their communities, right?
Mm-hmm. I do think too that National Philanthropy Day, given that its role as sort of an AFP sort of thing, or I think that's where its origins come from. It does, again, this is the let's get real part of it. Okay, a lot of times, and we aren't the only profession that decides to start, and then almost immediately we start handing awards to each other.
Mm.
Right. And that's okay. I mean, I've got no problem with awards, but I think what happens normally is that awards start going to those that lobby for it, or those that we are lobbying to, as opposed to looking at our sector and the needs of the sector. Handing awards out to people as philanthropists doesn't turn people into philanthropists. Handing awards out to people who work in philanthropy doesn't make people want to become fundraisers or work in not-for-profits. What they end up being is, a wonderful, honorific for the work that we have done, or the good works that I've done in the community. But then we'll move on. And the impact beyond it is kind of, questionable to a certain degree. Does anybody remember last year's National Philanthropy Day winner? Does anyone remember that person? It kind of reminds me of in downtown Toronto, if you walk through the certain building, you will run into the Canadian Business Hall of Fame and placards around that. Now, some of those people, Ted Rogers, for example, people know, but they knew them before they were in there. But a lot of those people are extraordinarily unknown. And unless you read what they did, which is always very, very, impressive, and they've done really well, you have no idea who they were. And that's okay. That's okay. They didn't go into business to get into a Hall of Fame. And neither do most people work in philanthropy or donate to get an award. And I'm not sure that's the right way for us to move things forward. But I cannot suggest that the idea is a wrong one. Or
Okay, I've got to say something here.
You bet.
Yeah,
See, there you go. Once I get grumpy, Lisa, then Ken has to pile on.
I know. It's
no,
a
I'm
slippery
not
slope.
piling on. I'm asking Lisa a question,
Sure.
and that is the lack of recognition and notoriety of National Philanthropy Day. It begs a question, and that is: are we fundraisers ashamed of our profession? Do we want to keep it quiet? And don't give me an answer. I just want to leave the question.
Right. You're just stirring the pot, Ken. You're stirring the pot.
Well, it's. I think we have to ask that.
No, I think it's valid.
It's if I'm a sports figure and something an award's given or recognition, you're out there with your trophy and you're marching down the street with crowds around you. Profession is are we a little ashamed of it?
Well, I'm gonna push back, Ken. Here's one of our sort of you and I back and forth, and Lisa, you have to put up with this. I think that the profession itself ought to be in the background. That's the whole idea of it. It's not supposed to be up front. The donors we often highlight. Now, again, we give each other awards. That's great, and because we do work hard. But when I teach, I always talk about the difference between the politician and the diplomat. And fundraisers are diplomats. I've mentioned it here before, and I'll mention it again as we go along.
Yeah, okay.
And that's a quiet in the background activity.
I totally agree, and I'm not talking about fundraisers in the background, in the foreground. I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about the profession, right? And the topic, philanthropy. Are we ashamed of philanthropy? Have we besmirched it with our actions as professionals? So that's all I want to leave. We're not going to.
All right, we'll put a pin in it there. I think it's just some really interesting questions, and I think those are things that individuals can ask themselves about how they are framing the work that they do to themselves, to their teams, and then outwards to others. How around the dinner table and somebody asks, "What do you do?" Are you proud? Do you put it out there? Are you talking about it, or are you quietly just kind of, just saying, well, I work with such and such organization. Are you proud of the organization and maybe not your specific role? I don't know. These are good questions, and this is, and at the heart of it, we're all people, and people bring their own kind of feelings and insecurities and all of that to the table as well. And I feel like as a profession, fundraisers wear their heart on their sleeve probably more than in for-profit, but maybe that's my assumption. So anyways, more to talk. Let's take a break. We have one more topic left we want to cover. Ed is talking about keeping us all on the same language. We want to talk about the same thing. So let's take a break, come back for the final segment, and then we'll be done for another day, but not yet. Okay, here we are back for the final segment of Let's Get Real, Perspectives on Fundraising. You've heard from Ken Ramsey, you've heard from myself, Lisa McDonald, and now Ed Sluga is talking to us about the language of fundraising.
Yeah, thanks. And one of the things when we set up this new podcast around this, I had as one of the things I always wanted us to bring up in these episodes of the podcast, some lingering issue that I find has been there that needs addressing. And this is one of those lingering issues. And it's the language of fundraising. And, the question is always, and I talk about this regularly, I've heard it from other professionals as eminent as Ken Ramsey and others, Lisa, you and I, peers of ours, like, Ed, why are you beating on about this? Why does it matter? So I do think it matters. And, from a philosophical point of view, the whole notion of a common knowledge of what we are doing does a lot of different things. One of it brings us together as a profession. We often talk about this as a profession. And I think, a mature profession does have a common knowledge. When you say a word today at this organization and you repeat it tomorrow at another organization across the country, whatever that word is, everyone who's a fundraiser would understand what you are talking about. That is not the case today. We do not have that common knowledge. Language, of course, is flexible, generally speaking. And I know, Lisa, you know that better than anyone, working in the world of language, right?
Yeah.
Through the various means. Yes, new words are being brought into dictionaries and into common usage all the time. So I'm not trying to keep us frozen in a moment. What I'd like to do is establish a moment where if I say a program, or if I say a tactic, if I say a donor, it matters. It means something. And I'll use that donor as a good example. And Ken, I know you do lots of data analysis, right? So one of the things I often talk about with clients is, how many donors do you have? And they'll give us how many people are on their CRM. Well, some of those people are no longer donors. They haven't been donors. Some of them are deceased. That's your data set. You know that, Ken, better than anyone. That's your data set. Your donor set are those people as you define them. Normally, it means somebody who's giving today. That's a donor. They're current in their donations. But there seems to be a lack right across the country in every sector, in every kind of organization, even amongst people who utilize the database, the difference between what the database number is and the donor number is for the organization. That makes it incredibly difficult. Now, look, consultants like me and you, Ken and Lisa, I know, in working with lots of organizations, that's great business for us because we can go in and talk to them about this. But the idea of a standard way of talking is really important. And it's also important when we talk to donors because we confuse donors as much as they are confused when they come to us. The utilization of language, and it's not all the same language. Leadership giving versus major giving versus planned giving versus legacy giving. It's a really interesting thing. So I spoke to a colleague of ours who's CEO of a hospital foundation, and they brought up a really good point when I talked about the difference between a major gift and a legacy gift. What they said was, we just got a 9-figure gift and to the hospital, Isn't that a legacy gift? Even though they're giving it to me today, that's going to create a legacy. And so, and that's where I said, God, that's why I love the term planned giving, partly too, because planned giving is translatable directly into French, where legacy giving is not. So you can see all of these issues come up. And I wish it was just from a lack of understanding. But I do think that there are organizations out there for lots of different reasons, some of them to differentiate themselves from others, or because they have new leaders coming in from outside the sector. And Ken and Lisa, we talk about leadership and we talk about leaders from outside the sector a lot, and we'll talk about them more. But what I do know is they come in and say, how do we think outside the box? Let's stop calling these people major gift officers and start calling them individual philanthropy leads.
Yeah.
That I'm not saying we need to keep it all the same, but we are busy explaining what all these things are on a regular basis. When, our donors, as Tracy Church, our prospect research colleague, who's kind of one of the foremost researchers in Canada, will tell you the donors don't even care. The donors just want to support. But we're busy making up new words, making up new titles, making up new phrases and terminology for our sector when donors just want to give. We're making it harder for ourselves. We're confusing everyone. And finally, I'll say this, it leads to stress in the sector. Because if I'm working in a particular type of fundraising with this organization, and I know my stuff, and I move to another organization to seemingly do the same work, I need to now learn a whole different set of language, even though I'm doing exactly the same thing. Why are we creating that unnecessarily? So is there a way for us to implement this set of knowledge, this common knowledge across the sector? It's only through education, perhaps through certification. And that's a whole other topic, which is a put a pin in it topic, as Lisa likes to say. But, I think this is at the root of where we are with a lot of the things that we've talked about today, in the past, and going forward. Language is key and powerful. And I think we need to grab a hold of it and try to make it so it's useful for us, as rather than fighting against us.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in on you, Ken, here, because and my comment is going to be short. I think this is one of those issues that will continue to persist, and I think there's very little we can do about it because,
Are you suggesting I'm tilting at windmills here?
I think that within our spheres of influence, we can have those conversations and try to, make a case for standardization and some common kind of terms and all of that. I mean, it's always worth having the conversation and pointing out that sometimes this is where the misunderstandings start, but ultimately, can we move the needle on it? Doubtful. And I'm not a pessimist, by choice or very often at heart, but I think, whether it's like people getting cutesy with their job titles, whether it's, yes, trying to find a new way to incorporate innovation, how else to launch an innovative new idea, then use different language than people haven't heard before. I mean, in theory, you can understand where people are coming from, but in practice, it just does. It adds to confusion. And I hear you. I commiserate with you, but I don't think there's anything to be done about it.
Okay. I have two things to say. Of course.
One is, I disagree, Ken. I think this will be more than two, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to start with two. The first one is there's a corollary to what you're saying. And the corollary is we also don't have benchmarks to measure our business in a comparative way. And there's no other profession that I know of that doesn't have benchmarks.
It's another one of those pin moments, Lisa. Benchmarks.
Yeah. Benchmarks. Noted.
But it relates to the second point And we don't have benchmarks, by the way, because we don't want benchmarks.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to hear the worst case of that, listen to Dan Pallotta,
Mm-hmm.
who argues for no benchmarks.
Another pin. Lots of pins coming out in this.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Okay, but I went, one way to respond to what you said, Lisa, to change that is to regulate our industry.
Mhm.
And I watched closely what they did in Great Britain, because it got so bad in Great Britain, the misuse of the charitable status and the manipulation of potential donors, that they created a charity commission.
Mhm.
Now they didn't do a good job of that, but that's another topic. But I've been arguing that eventually, and we are the largest industry in Canada that deals with vulnerable people that is not regulated. And
Mhm.
we're regulated by CRA. It's a joke. So, but I once went to this idea of regulation and self-regulation, because governments want industries to self-regulate now. They'll never regulate, but they want us to self-regulate. So I went to someone I respect greatly, Mark Bloomberg, and I had lunch with him. This 10 years ago. And I said, Mark, I want to start a process to create self-regulation. And he, much like you, Lisa, said, Ken, don't waste your time. It'll never happen. I said, why not? And he said, because the senior people in the charitable sector don't want to be regulated.
No.
They don't want to be benchmarked. They don't want that. They got good jobs. They're the decision makers, and they don't want to upset any apple cart here. So it shows itself, I believe, by lack of consistent nomenclature in our profession, because that then leads to comparisons, benchmarking, accountability. Right?
Accountability is the key.
Yeah, and we don't, and as an industry, we don't want it until shit hits the fan.
Exactly.
And we've been in Canada, we've been pretty well devoid of scandal. Great Britain got a dose of it. And
Everyone was trying to cover their butts after the We Charity, right?
Yes. Well, and to that point, if I can jump in, Ken, because
yeah,
in our lifetimes, and we're all very young, there has been a sector that has gone from almost zero regulation to incredible regulation, and that is the financial investment profession, right?
Mhm.
What used to be called stockbrokers. Stockbrokers, and Michael Lewis, if you want to read Michael Lewis's books, early books, he talks about the difference, right, that happened. Stockbrokers, investment advisors, used to be a blue collar job, right? A lot of people without university degrees could get a job as a stockbroker, right? No regulation whatsoever. And what happened? Scandal after scandal after scandal. And so finally, a group of people, and this is not long ago, this would be in the 60s, 50s, and 60s, said, enough is enough. We need to get our hands around this. As you say, Ken, scandal happened, right? And which elevated this need. Here we go, fast forward to 2025. You need incredible levels of certification. You need education. If you're an investment, and to the point where they've changed the terms, you're an investment advisor, chances are you've gone to university, post grad courses, professional courses, or academic courses. You've written exams. You have to recertify all of the time. Scandal has gone down. Still, the most likely place for scandal is within that sector, but it's happened. And by the way, the people who are on the forefront of that regulatory activity and the certification said very clearly, and I had a chance to speak to some of them, that we as leaders in the sector could not get jobs in that sector now. get to Mark Bloomberg's point, the current people could not get jobs again, but that's where you have to be smart. And again, I think that is another indicator of some of the folks leading our sector. Of course, you grandfather every person or grandparent every person, and you also make it something that we're going to put into place fully in 10 to 15 years. So you're in and you're out. So you're in currently and you're out before the new regulations come in. Do I think we need to go all the way and do that? I don't know. But I do think there will be a moment, and as you say rightly, Lisa, We Charity probably was something that should have tweaked people's minds. We were in the middle of COVID. There were lots of things going on. Probably that went under the radar to a huge degree. But there will
And
be
I'll
something
mention, I'll mention GoFundMe right now, and the
Totally.
creation of charity pages. Like we
Totally.
haven't even really talked about that. But I think in this context, it just shows another example of the far-reaching effects, of a little scandalous, but done in the name of charity,
Yep.
done with, so there is going to be more of these reckoning moments for our sector to try to wrap our hands around it as it continues to grow and multiply in many ways.
And if I can
And
just
here's
add one more. I mean, let's not even go to the scandals. If if I'm approached by the local public school to make a donation, and I give them $100, let's say, because my kids go there or whatever, they will ask me for fundraised dollars. Can you, I'm fundraising for the school. Here's $100. And I'll say, can I get a tax receipt? And they will say, no, you can't. But they're using the term fundraising. And that, I think, is causing some of the issues out there, that everybody's fundraising. They're going to GoFundMe to fundraise. They're going on to, everyone is fundraising. And that's causing a lot of confusion. And there's no way for us to go and say, you can't fundraise. You're not a charity, because anyone can fundraise right now. And it's going to be a detriment.
Technically, by the way, if you give $100 to a public school, I think you can claim a charitable tax receipt because you're giving to the Crown.
You can claim it, but they won't give you the tax.
No, they won't.
That's the problem.
So today we've started with, we're part of a noble profession.
Yeah.
There are ways that it
long
can
time ago
spotlighted and celebrated.
Yes, I brought the grumpy at the end.
But all of these things don't take away the fact that regulation is still needed for accountability and transparency, and that I think we're struggling to kind of recognize our pitfalls and our weak points and find ways to shore them up, whether it's and maybe it does start with a common language and common understandings. I don't know, lots more to talk about. We're going to take a break, and then we're coming back to our wrap up and our Let's Be Charitable moment. So we're going to come back with things we're going to leave on a positive note. Let's be charitable, coming back in just a moment. So I'm told that our producer, Jody, edits out our little bit of conversation during the breaks, but I have to tell you that the conversation does not end when we break, and there's always more to say, and I think that while we don't always come up with definitive answers to our questions, I think the hope is just by lobbing these ideas out and tossing them around and looking at how they interplay with each other or play against each other, we hope that seeds are planted, as Ken says, and that people take away a notion or an idea that becomes that thought leadership that we continue to look for. So there we go. So in terms of our Let's Be Charitable, I'm going to jump in and do mine first,
Sure.
Which usually I don't do. But I came across this charity. It was completely by accident. But if we're talking about what philanthropy is, one of the notions that I love is that idea of neighbor helping neighbor. I really think that's the grassroots of philanthropy, and I think that's where it all began, and still where it often comes from. And I came across this charity called Community Fridges Toronto, and I thought it was just a really cool idea. It's neighbor helping neighbor. It's 6 locations across the GTA area, and it has to do with having accessible food 24/7 for people within the communities, staffed by volunteers, staff, maintained by community members. It's one of those grassroots initiative that may or may not grow into something more larger scale, but I'm going to give them a shout out because I just think that is the epitome of what is noble and good about our profession, and where often really good things begin.
That's
And
great.
I would like to include their website
Yep.
also at the bottom of this, because it's pretty cool.
Well,
Ed,
I'll go next. Yeah, thanks. And I think it's along the same lines of both what you're saying, Lisa, but what Ken said a couple of episodes ago, which was, kind of a shout out to all those people who are entering into our noble profession, people who are still, even though it's hard, even though there's stress, they're coming in, they want to do good work. And I want to shout out to just the charities out there, the charities and not-for-profits that are still working so hard, so passionately. I was just in Ottawa this week for the launch of a new initiative by the Canadian Wildlife Federation. They already do tremendous, great work across the country. And frankly, if they just focused on that work for the immediate and long-term future, we would still find them to be an incredibly powerful and important charity. But no, they're constantly innovating, constantly looking for ways to continue to live their mission in the world. And even though it's hard, even in the face of quote unquote declining donors out there and all of that, they're like very clear, need to get going on other initiatives, really push our mission. So let's be charitable. All those groups out there that are working so hard constantly to push this incredibly important part of the economy and society forward. So shout out to them. Shout out to the group that you talked about, Lisa, and all those groups that are constantly moving the needle for the betterment of all of us.
yep.
Yeah. Okay. So mine is quite different. And here's what happened. I was just this past week with the PG Growth team and celebrating 15 years of PG, the company PG Growth. And I've been around for most of it. Ed, of course, created it along with Jim Hilborn. But there was a guy there. He was a guest at this get together. And he came up to me. He said, Ken, I haven't seen you in 22 or 3 years. And he introduced himself, and I knew him from 23 years ago. And he was a client. He worked for a school, and he had hired my company to communicate to his support base and speak to them about the possibility of leaving a gift in their will, a gift in their estate. And he said, I want to tell you about one man that your people, that you can trained, and we sent them information on the school, and we had on average 15 to 20 minute conversations with his support base. And one man, just his estate, he is just being processed, and he's leaving a $10 million gift to this school for scholarship.
Wow.
And that impact on the lives of young people for decades can't even be measured. It's so huge. But it occurred to me, one little action that myself and my team, actually, because I just trained the team and set it all up, one little conversation 23 years ago produces this, right?
Amazing.
And it'll change hundreds, maybe thousands of lives. And in many ways, that's a very dramatic thing. It could have been $3,000, and it would still be significant.
Yeah.
But you don't realize, if you're doing good things the right way out there, you don't realize what the ultimate benefit will be to the world we live in. That's my good news.
That's really good news. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Ken. It's been a pleasure speaking with you both. You've been listening to the Let's Get Real podcast, Canadian Perspectives on Fundraising. We thank Jody Barron Sluga. She is our producer. She puts it all together to make sense for you folks. I am the editor of Hillborn Charity E-News and Foundation Magazine, and you can find us at www.charityinfo.ca. Until next time, we look forward to getting real with you next week again. Bye for now.